Antiochus Epiphanes, Seleucid king of the Hellenistic Syrian kingdom. He was taken hostage in Rome, where he learned about Roman institutions. On his release, he ousted a usurper to take over Syria. He conquered Egypt, except Alexandria, 169, and ruled Egypt as regent. He took Jerusalem, 167, and enforced its Greek Hellenization. Jewish Mosaic law and tradition were forbidden on pain of death. In 164, Judas Maccabeus and the anti-Greek Jews conquered most of Judea, 164, tore down the altar of Zeus, and reconsecrated the temple. Epiphanes had tried by force to detach Torah from the religion of Judaism and assimilate it into common Hellenistic culture.
When news of what had happened reached the king Antiochus, he took it to mean that Judea was in revolt. So, raging inwardly, he left Egypt and took the city Jerusalem by storm. He commanded his soldiers to cut down relentlessly everyone they met, and to kill those who went into their houses. Then there was massacre of young and old, destruction of boys, women and children, and slaughter of young girls and infants. Within the total of 3 days, 80,000 were destroyed, 40,000 in hand-to-hand fighting, and as many were sold into slavery as were killed. Not content with this, Antiochus dared to enter the most holy temple in all the world, guided by Menelaus, who had become a traitor both to the Mosaic laws and to his country. He took the holy vessels with his polluted hands and swept away with profane hands the consecrated offerings that other kings had made to enhance the glory and honor of the place. So Antiochus carried off 1,800 talents from the temple and hurried away to Antioch, thinking in his arrogance that he could sail on the land and walk on the sea, because his mind was elated. Antiochus sent Apollonius, the captain of the Mysians, with an army of 22,000, and commanded him to kill all the grown men and to sell the women and boys as slaves. When this man arrived in Jerusalem, he pretended to be peaceably disposed and waited until the holy Sabbath day. Then, finding the Jews not at work, he ordered his troops to parade under arms. He put to the sword all those who came out to see them, then rushed into the city with his armed warriors and killed great numbers of people. But Judas Maccabeus, with about 9 others, got away to the wilderness and kept himself and his companions alive in the mountains as wild animals do. They continued to live on what grew wild, so that they might not share in the defilement. Not long after this, the king sent an Athenian senator to compel the Jews to forsake the laws of their ancestors and no longer to live by the laws of God, also to pollute the temple in Jerusalem and to call it the temple of Olympian Zeus. Harsh and utterly grievous was the onslaught of evil, for the temple was filled with debauchery and reveling by the nations, who played with prostitutes and had intercourse with women within the sacred precincts, and besides brought in things for sacrifice that were unfit. The altar was covered with abominable offerings that were forbidden by the laws. People could neither keep the Sabbath nor observe the festivals of their ancestors, nor so much as confess themselves to be Jews. On the monthly celebration of the king's birthday, the Jews were taken under bitter constraint to partake of the Greek sacrifices, and when a festival of Dionysus was celebrated, they were compelled to wear wreaths of ivy and to walk in the procession in honor of Dionysus. At the suggestion of the people of Ptolemais, a decree was issued to the neighboring Greek cities that they should adopt the same policy toward the Jews and make them partake of the Greek sacrifices, and should kill those who did not choose to change over to Greek customs. One could see, therefore, the misery that had come upon them. For example, 2 women were brought in for having circumcised their children. They publicly paraded them around the city with their babies hanging at their breasts and then hurled them down headlong from the wall. Others who had assembled in the caves nearby in order to observe the 7th day secretly were betrayed to Philip and were all burned together, because their piety kept them from defending themselves in view of their regard for that most holy day. The Martyrdom of Eleazar. Eleazar, one of the scribes in high position, a man now advanced in age and of noble presence, was being forced to open his mouth to eat pig's flesh. But he, welcoming death with honor rather than life with pollution, went up to the rack of his own accord, spitting it out as all ought to go, who have the courage to refuse things that it is not right to taste, even for the natural love of life. Eleazar responded to those who advised compromise. Even if for the present I would avoid the punishment of mortals, yet whether I live or die, I will not escape the hands of the Almighty. Therefore, by bravely giving up my life now, I will show myself worthy of my old age, and leave to the young a noble example of how to die a good death, willingly and nobly, for the revered and holy laws. When he had said this, he was dragged at once to the rack. Those who a little before had acted toward him with good will now changed to ill will, because the words he had uttered were in their opinion sheer madness. When he was about to die under the blows, he groaned aloud and said, "It is clear to the Lord in his holy knowledge that, though I might have been saved from death, I am enduring terrible sufferings in my body under this beating. But in my soul, I am glad to suffer these things because I fear him." So in this way he died, leaving in his death an example of nobility and a memorial of courage, not only to the young, but to the great body of his nation. Martyrdom of a mother and her 7 sons. It also happened that 7 brothers with their mother were arrested and tortured with whips and scourges by the king to force them to eat pork in violation of God's law. One of the brothers, speaking for the others, said, "What do you expect to learn by questioning us? We are ready to die, rather than transgress the laws of our ancestors." At that, the king, in a fury, gave orders to have pans and cauldrons heated. These were quickly heated, and he gave the order to cut out the tongue of the one who had spoken for the others, to scalp him and cut off his hands and feet, while the rest of his brothers and his mother looked on. When he was completely maimed but still breathing, the king ordered them to carry him to the fire and fry him. As a cloud of smoke spread from the pan, the brothers and their mother encouraged one another to die nobly. After the first brother had died in this manner, they brought the second to be made sport of. After tearing off the skin and hair of his head, they asked him, "Will you eat the pork, rather than have your body tortured limb by limb?" Answering in the language of his ancestors, he said, "Never." So he in turn suffered the same tortures as the first. With his last breath he said, "You accursed monster, you are depriving us of this present life, but the King of the universe will raise us up to eternal life, because we have died for his laws." After him the third suffered their cruel sport. He put forth his tongue at once when told to do so, and bravely stretched out his hands as he spoke these noble words. "It was from heaven that I received these. For the sake of his laws, I disregard them. From him I hope to receive them again." Even the king and his attendants marveled at the young man's spirit, because he regarded his sufferings as nothing. After he had died, they tortured and maltreated the 4th brother in the same way. When he was near death, he said, "It is my choice to die at the hands of mortals with the hope that God will restore me to life, but for you, there will be no resurrection to life." They next brought forward the 5th brother and maltreated him. Looking at the king, he said, "Mortal though you are, you have power over human beings, so you do what you please. But do not think that our nation is forsaken by God. Only wait, and you will see how his great power will torment you and your descendants." After him they brought the 6th brother. When he was about to die, he said, "Have no vain illusions. We suffer these things on our own account, because we have sinned against our God. That is why such shocking things have happened. Do not think, then, that you will go unpunished for having dared to fight against God." As the youngest brother was still alive, the king appealed to him, not with mere words, but with promises on oath, to make him rich and happy if he would abandon his ancestral customs. He would make him his friend and entrust him with high office. When the youth paid no attention to him at all, the king appealed to the mother, urging her to advise her boy to save his life. After he had urged her for a long time, she agreed to persuade her son. She leaned over close to him, and in derision of the cruel tyrant, said in their native language, Son, have pity on me, who carried you in my womb for 9 months, nursed you for 3 years, brought you up, educated and supported you to your present age. I beg you, child, to look at the heavens and the earth and see all that is in them. Then you will know that God did not make them out of existing things. In the same way humankind came into existence. Do not be afraid of this executioner, but be worthy of your brothers, and accept death, so that in the time of mercy I may receive you again with your brothers." She had scarcely finished speaking when the youth said, "What is the delay? I will not obey the king's command. I obey the command of the law given to our ancestors through Moses. But you, who have contrived every kind of evil for the Hebrews, will not escape the hands of God. We indeed are suffering because of our sins. Though for a little while our living Lord has been angry, correcting and chastising us, he will again be reconciled with his servants. But you, wretch, most vile of mortals, do not in your insolence buoy yourself up with unfounded hopes as you raise your hand against the children of heaven. You have not yet escaped the judgment of the Almighty and all-seeing God. Our brothers, after enduring brief pain, have drunk of never-failing life under God's covenant. But you, by the judgment of God, shall receive just punishments for your arrogance. Like my brothers, I offer up my body and my life for our ancestral laws, imploring God to show mercy soon to our nation, and by afflictions and blows to make you confess that he alone is God. Through me and my brothers, may there be an end to the wrath of the Almighty that has justly fallen on our whole nation." At that, the king became enraged and treated him even worse than the others, since he bitterly resented the boy's contempt. Thus he too died undefiled, putting all his trust in the Lord. Last of all, after her sons, the mother was put to death.